If I could ask, what drew you to the Asia-Pacific Center for Security Studies?
So I spent my career in universities, and I worked in science and I worked in humanities, worked in management. And what was missing was the amount of influence I felt that I was having on government and on the sectors that were of interest to me. So when I was exposed to working a little bit with APCSS, I saw an opportunity to join an organization that reaches out to governments across the region, to works with high-level individuals, and I thought that I can make a real difference here. My work can be of more value than it is where I currently am.
What keeps you up at night, Professor?
What concerns me the most is the inability of the different nations in the Indo-Pacific to work together on difficult challenges. Sometimes it's obvious to us that a problem exists, and yet all of these nations, because of the different political stances, because of their posturing, refuse to come together and work on something that is pretty simple. For example, climate change is something that is impacting all of us. It should be easy for all countries to come to some kind of agreement and work together on such a generic challenge. And yet we somehow fail to do that. Another issue in the region is demographics. So we're increasingly getting an aged population, and this region doesn't have the resources to support it. And we don't have the young population growing up to support it, and we don't have migration coming into the region to support it. So it's going to be a big challenge coming up in the future.
Professor, what is it that you think makes the Indo-Pacific region so special?
So this region contains about 60% of the global population and about 50% of the GDP of the world. But more fascinating than that, it contains such diversity. In the Pacific Islands alone, you have just as many nations as you do in the European Union. Add to that all of the ASEAN nations and the Northeast Asian nations and the South Asian nations, and you have this incredible diversity, which really is a cause for celebration and something we tap into at this center here. So we bring in people from all these different regions, and their differences seem to melt away. They enjoy each other's presence. They enjoy their different perspectives. They share the richness and diversity that comes from their different cultures. And it's a wonder to behold when it is all working well.
What are the top 3 challenges facing the Indo-Pacific today?
So one of the challenges in the Indo-Pacific region, indeed throughout the world, that is not being talked about very often is food security. We are going through our resources at a fantastic rate. The oceans are on their way to being depleted very quickly, and that will spell disaster for Asian countries that rely on a high amount of seafood for their protein components. And for the Western countries that rely on beef and lamb and other animals like that, they are degrading the environment to such an extent that is really unsustainable for the planet. And so food security is going to be an issue.
What advice would you give to the up-and-coming generations?
I'd say that do your best not to dwell on inherited problems. We come forward in this world carrying a lot of baggage, many of us. Governments in particular and organizations tend to have a lot of baggage that they bring forward because policies are a lot longer lasting than individuals. So younger people moving forward need to think a little bit more creatively about how do we get rid of this baggage? How do we change the world? How do we make it perfect right now? What do we need to do to get rid of those things that are holding us back from the past and to redesign the future the way that we want it to be? There was a wonderful book written by Russell Ackoff called Redesigning the Future, or Redesigning the Corporation. And in it, he said one of the biggest problems that we have is the blinkers that are put on us from the past. And what we need to do right now is design what we really want to be living in, and then work backwards from that and determine how we're going to get there. That's what young people need to be focused on.